Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order for Tuesday, 28 September 2021 at 7:30 a.m. Confirming member access. As a preliminary matter, this is Robert Holland, the Shrewsbury Electric and Cable Operations Selco Commission Chair. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Tony Trippi.
Here.
Maria Lemieux.
Here.
Mike Ruffolo.
Here.
Matt Beaton.
Here.
Staff, when I call your names, please respond in the affirmative. Christopher Roy, Selco General Manager.
Here.
Ralph Iacarino, Director of Engineering and Operations.
Here.
Joelle Malavar, Director of Broadband Technologies.
Here.
Jackie Pratt, Director of Integrated Resources and Communications.
Here.
Jonathan Malavar, Senior Engineer.
Here.
Patrick Collins, Integrated Resources Analyst.
Here.
Tracy Schultz, Human Resources Coordinator.
Here.
Jim Zacco, Director of Finance and Administration.
Here.
Rick Maxian, Marketing Coordinator.
Here.
Okay. And then the scheduled presenters for Great Blue, our survey contractor, Michael Vigent,
I am
CEO.
here.
Okay. And Catherine Vesci, Project Manager.
Here.
Okay. This is good morning. This open meeting of the Selco Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Senate Bill 2475, signed into law by Governor Baker on June 16th, 2021. Suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30, Alpha, Paragraph 18, this meeting of the Selco Commission will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. The order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For this meeting, the Selco Commission is convening by Google Meet as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please be sure to press *6 to mute your device. However, that probably will not be needed today because this meeting will not feature public comment. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call. And before I go any further, I'd like to thank Mark Serra and the Shrewsbury Media Connection for their support in live broadcasting and repeatedly broadcasting these Selco meetings. With that said, the meeting has been called to order at 7:30. I'd like to go through the agenda. And the first item is review and consider approving bills and warrants. In this case, we'll take a roll. I'll take a roll call for any comments, and if there aren't any, then we'll take a vote. And I personally will sign for all the five of us if we approve the warrants. With that said, Tony Trippi, do you have any comments on the warrants?
I do not.
Maria Lemieux, any comments?
I just have a couple. I just saw a couple of things I was just curious about. There were legal fees of like $11,000 and what that was in regards to. And that was 61300. And then just a couple of vendors that we paid. One was Frank Radigan. It was like $5,000. And then there's a George Cancel. I didn't know what that represented. So just some clarification, please.
Chairman, I can speak to the Frank Radigan invoice.
Yes, Mr. Iacarino.
Frank Radigan is our consultant for PTF charges, and that's related to the Centec substation. We, as a result of the Centec substation, we are transmission owners, and Frank assists us in filing these necessary documents so that we could get the allocation back to us through transmission ownership, which is quite substantial, a credit to the Selco transmission bill.
Thank you. There were a couple other outstanding things. Mr. Roy or Mr. Zacco?
Yeah, Joel, I can speak in behalf of George Cancel is a parent company for Telenetworks. They are a company that works in underground, digging, excavating, conduit proofing. So that's them. They're working for the fiber to the home build out.
Okay. And I think finally there was a question on $11,000 for lawyers' fees.
I am looking into that right now to see what we paid for that.
Okay, while you're looking, I'll take a roll of the other board commissioners and see if anybody else has any questions. Mr. Ruffolo, any questions?
Just quickly, there were large invoices to Tyler Technologies and Matrix Design Group, and I was just wondering what those entities were.
I believe Tyler is Harris, our
No, Tyler
No.
Technologies is Munis.
Okay.
They are our ERP system. So all of our financials. And what was the second one?
Matrix Design Group.
Matrix.
They are the fiber designing company that we're using for the fiber to the home project.
Fiber to home, yeah. Is that ER for Tyler? Is that a one-time expense or annual expense?
For Tyler, it should be an annual expense, I believe, but it might include some cost to the town that we charge back to them.
Okay, because it was 245,000 or so. So it was higher than I usually see for any particular vendor. But I know ERP systems are pretty expensive.
Yes, and that is included in the town.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zarco. Mr. Beaton, any questions?
Still learning. Handful of questions.
That's all right.
One new guy question now for you right here. What is a charge from the Shrewsbury Light Department? Could someone explain that to me?
So
Mr. Zarco?
I can explain that. Basically, right now, the way we're set up is when we try to split invoice or payroll charges between divisions, we are actually charging the other division, cutting a physical check and paying off the other division. This is something that we are in the process of changing. It, I believe, started historically with, we had two different warrants. We paid one week for cable, the other week for electric. And then it moved to now we pay both weekly, but we pay them in two separate warrants. And I'm working right now so that next year, and we're going to do it at the turnover of the year, we can start paying everything in one warrant and split it between both divisions. And the legal fees, I was just looking into them, and I believe these are a combination of different questions we had that we ask a lawyer that is a municipal lawyer that goes through just, what the laws are in different terms to say, yes, this is, within the bounds of what you can do. No, that is not.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Do any of the commissioners have any other questions on the warrants? If not, take a roll call vote to approve the bills and warrants. Mr. Trippi?
Yes.
Maria Lemieux?
Yes.
Mike Ruffolo?
Yes, except as to the conflict from Myrick O'Connell.
Okay, got it. And Mr. Beaton?
Yes.
Okay, and Bob Holland, yes. So the warrants, bills and warrants are approved. Quickly on to the third item on the agenda is review and finalize the Selco Commission meeting schedule of 2021-2022. That is agenda item 3, and it's a proposed schedule. If board members have any board members have any comments on the dates that are proposed, I'll go down the list. Mr. Trippi.
No comments.
Okay. Mrs. Lemieux.
No comments. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Ruffolo.
All set.
Okay. And Mr. Beaton.
Negative, other than I may have a conflict or two that I can alert the rest of the board to at a later time.
Yeah, we all that usually we'll set it in. It's kind of in warm jello when we approve the schedule for the year, and then as time goes on, the closer you get to the dates, we'll find out, especially with around schools, vacations, and whatnot. So we've got that. Okay, with that, take a roll call. A motion to approve the commission meeting calendar.
Yes, so moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote to approve the proposed schedule. Mr. Trippi.
Yes.
Mrs. Lemieux.
Yes.
Mr. Ruffolo.
Yes.
Mr. Beaton.
Yes.
And Bob Holland, yes. Okay, so the proposed Selco meeting calendar is approved. Moving on to the fourth item is review and consider approving the meeting minutes of June 21st, 2021. And I'll also include this, and there's also item 5 is meeting minutes of July 26th, 2021. I'll go through the board members to see if anybody has any comments on either one of those minutes. Mr. Trippi?
No, no comment.
Mrs. Lemieux,
No comment.
Mr. Ruffolo,
No comments.
Mr. Beaton.
No comments.
Okay, and I have no comments either. Can I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes of both June 21st and July 26th of 2021?
Yeah, so moved.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote to approve. Mr. Trippy,
Yes.
Mrs. Lemieux,
Yes.
Mr. Ruffolo,
Yes.
Mr. Beaton,
Yes.
and Mr. Holland, Bob Holland is also approved. Great. The meeting minutes of both the June 21st and July 26th are approved. Next item is item 6, which is election of officers. The annual meeting of a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary. Currently, I am the chair. The vice chair is Mr. Ruffolo, and the secretary is Mr. Trippy. Do we have motions for any of the positions or offices?
I move that we elect Bob Holland as the chair.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Are there any other nominations for chair? Okay. And hearing none, I'll move on to the next. How about for vice chair? I'll nominate Mr. Ruffolo if he's willing to continue on in his position.
It's been a hard run, but I am willing.
I'll second that.
Okay, great. And finally, secretary, Mr. Trippy. Again, I'll nominate Mr. Trippy as the secretary to continue on the fine traditions that he's done.
I'll second.
Okay. With that said, do we have any other nominations on the floor for any of the positions? Hearing none, we'll vote for myself, Bob Holland, as the chair, Mr. Ruffolo as the vice chair, and Mr. Trippy as the secretary. Mr. Trippy? Looking for a vote on the three to accept the three positions as nominated. Mr. Trippy,
what do you need?
I just need you to say you can.
Yes or
concur
no?
with
Yeah.
it.
Yes,
Okay.
all three.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Lemieux,
Yes.
Mr. Ruffolo,
Yes.
Mr. Beaton.
Yes.
Okay, and Bob Holland, yes. So the three people elected, Bob Holland as chairman, Mr. Ruffolo as vice chair, and Mr. Trippy as secretary. Now for the biggest and best. I'm sorry the folks that had to put up so long with the other stuff as we cleaned our agenda. But today is 7. We have a review from the Great Blue Research electric survey results. I want to say. Jackie, do you want to just introduce the folks or Mr. Roy?
Sure. Either way, Chris. All right.
Go ahead, Jackie.
So Great Blue Research has been working in the municipal electric space, particularly here in Massachusetts, for many, many years. I believe they did our first survey for us back in 1997. We conduct regular customer satisfaction surveys every 2 years, and they do them for us both on the electric and cable sides of the business. And it helps us benchmark overall trajectory of customer satisfaction, and we're able to gather customer sentiment on important investments and strategic planning for the organization. So they've completed our survey, I think, in August, got the data together for us, and they're ready to talk about our most recent electric survey. Cable survey should be underway by the end of the year. We'll have more info for you guys likely in January at the January meeting.
Great. Mr. Vigent, are you going to lead the charge, or is Catherine?
I will. We're gonna joint tackle it while Catherine is pulling up the presentation. Let me first start by saying thank you to all of you. Lots of familiar faces and some new ones on the call as well. So good to see everyone. I wish we were in person, but good to see everyone. Just wanted to. What would you like us to set aside for time today? I wanted to be mindful of your schedule and what you have. I didn't know what time was allocated.
The short executive brief is welcome.
What's that?
The short executive brief is welcome.
Perfect. Okay. Easy enough. So what we'll do is we'll jump in. We'll plan to keep it to about 15, 20 minutes if that works for everyone. Again, as Catherine pulls this up and you start to see what we captured since last time, you'll see some comparisons from 2017, 2019 into the 2021 survey as well. I think it's important to note two things. First and foremost, in terms of our areas for investigation, we'll walk you through those on slide 6. It's essentially many things that we've covered for you in the past, rating the electric service of Selco, rating interactions with office personnel, awareness and importance of community ownership. While it's all brain dead simple for all of us on the call about public power, many folks still don't just understand the true complexity of public power. And some of that is because of the reliability and the relationship that they've had with you. They not really had to think about it all that much, but that is a key part to keep track of. Communication preferences, rating outage restoration, evaluation of Selco's efforts to curb carbon emissions, favorability of various generation sources, interest in and concerns regarding electric vehicles. We're seeing nationally, as well as in your service territory, the number of folks who are reporting a likelihood to purchase electric vehicles, as well as participate in incentive programs with you.
Excuse me, Michael.
Yeah.
It looks like we've lost Catherine. I'm going to just share my screen. I also have the presentation if that's helpful to you.
Perfect.
Right.
Perfect. And I'm sure she was probably trying to pull it up and logged herself out. She's in the next room, so if she doesn't jump back in, we'll go to it. All right. So Jackie, if you just want to jump ahead, I don't know if I have the ability to switch the slides, but if you want to just jump ahead to slide 6. There you go. Thank you very much. Awareness of and interest in time of use rates, awareness and interest in enrolling in Selco's Connected Homes program, knowledge and support of strategic electrification, and then demographic profiles of respondents. So this is basically the areas for investigation. We work with Jackie and team to build this survey. There's a lot of core survey questions that are built in from the meme group, and then we do individual questions. And you all, because of the electric and the cable, as Jackie mentioned, split that out over 2 surveys. And so from that standpoint, we're getting going on the next one. On this next page, which is important to understand, we did a mixed methodology. One of the big things that changed in COVID, and I think this is important to understand, in COVID, pre-COVID, we were seeing a completed survey by telephone in roughly 1 in every 23 to 25 phone calls. Now it's about 1 in 75. This is a good thing because it's allowed us to finally kind of really promote and push that digital collection of surveys, which has been around. It's been reliable, but folks on the participant side finally made that switch with us during COVID. It results in more surveys for less money, which is a good thing for budgets and data. What we also saw, and I'll cover it quickly in the demographic piece, is we saw a shift to a younger audience this go around, which is a good thing in many ways. And I'll tell you why when we get there. But the short and sweet of it all is you've known what your older population has been thinking about you for many, many years. Very loyal, very dedicated, very satisfied with the work that you've put in. They've had that relationship, so they've been through the good times and the bad times with you. Whereas your younger audience, who is now homeowners, who are now making up a significant population of your renters and homeowners, have a different expectation set. They want to deal with you less as people and deal with you more as in an electronic format, which goes against everything public power has taken pride in for so many years. You have taken pride, and I say we because I've worked with you for all of these years. We've taken pride in that ability where you walk into to an office and you get that friendly face that welcomes you. The younger audiences don't want that. So there's going to need to be a shift in how you all think about how you do service and how you provide service. The other thing that I'll point out is the margin for error. At 373 completed surveys, plus or minus margin for error 5%. This will particularly come into play when you start to see some dips or some small increases. Anything within that 4 to 5% margin is statistically unchanged. And I will say, given the younger demographic shift and COVID, even when you see some small dips in here, these are big numbers. They're numbers to be proud of, and it says a lot about how the organization has handled change, particularly over the last couple of years. So that being said, we have Catherine back. Catherine, it looked like you were having some issues, so Jackie pulled up the presentation. So I'll let Catherine take it over from here, and we can jump right over to slide 9.
Yeah, it works for me. Sorry about that, guys. I tried to share my screen and then it kicked me out of the meeting. So I'm back here now. but we can just take this to the next page. And essentially what these first couple of pages are kind of our key study findings. And these are just kind of our overall large takeaways and sort of conclusions that we came to and findings based on the data. So our first one is regarding the Connected Homes program, and understanding that this is a very new program at Selco. I believe it was January 2021 when it was implemented. So we're looking at awareness being about 21.2%, so a little bit over a fifth. So really what this consideration is just giving a little bit more education to customers about what this Connected Home program actually is, what devices that they need to have in their home in order to take advantage of the program, just to help kind of continue to build awareness, just knowing that it's probably your newest or one of your newest programs, giving it a little bit of love and showing customers the benefits of that program was really our consideration here. But I'll go into this a little bit more in depth later on when we actually get to this page. But really 21.2% is definitely not considered low awareness when you're looking at the fact that the program was only implemented about 9 months ago.
And to provide a little context there, in studying deregulation and the launch of deregulation in the state of Texas, where there was millions and millions of dollars spent on education, after about a year and a half of millions of dollars spent, their awareness level was 12%. So that gives you spend versus awareness, and after 9 months, you're at 21%. That is a big number. So yeah. that is, as Catherine mentioned, a really good number.
Mm-hmm. Next page.
Catherine, can I, real quick, Jackie, can you just give a rundown on what the connected homes are, so the people that are reviewing the other 80% that weren't aware will have an idea of what we're talking about?
Sure. So Connected Homes is a demand response program, and it's a really excellent opportunity for customers to earn incentives by enrolling some of their smart home devices, like Wi-Fi thermostats. It's compatible with Nest and Honeywell. Electric vehicle chargers, compatibility with ChargePoint or JuiceBox, Sonnen home battery systems, GE and Rheem heat pump hot water heaters, Sensibo mini split controllers. And basically what it is, by enrolling in this program, each customer gets a monthly incentive for every device that is participating in the program. And it allows Selco to change your temperature by a couple of degrees or drop your EV charging down to level 1 during peak energy use. And that helps everybody in our footprint save money.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jackie.
Great. So our next one was on building awareness and support for strategic electrification initiatives. Largely folks were not super knowledgeable of strategic electrification as a concept. I think once people heard what examples of strategic electrification were, things like electric vehicles, heat pumps, things like that, people are like, oh, okay, I actually do support that. But only 15.8% of respondents were knowledgeable of this concept. So a lot of this goes into, again, education about what these initiatives actually are, what they mean, to help folks determine whether they support or oppose it, and hopefully build support for those initiatives. Next page. Thanks. Oh, awesome. And this one is actually something that's already been acted upon, so we can go through this pretty quickly. But one of our recommendations was to introduce an electric vehicle incentive program, and that's already been done. So great job acting on our survey results. But basically, the finding here is that over half of respondents said that their next car purchase is likely to be an electric vehicle, which is actually very high when you look at what the national averages. I think nationally it's around 34% when we're looking at public power customers. So seeing over 50% for Selco is very high. And people were also very interested and likely to participate in an electric vehicle incentive program. And so our recommendation was essentially to look into implementing that program, which as of September 1st, an electric vehicle rebate program has already been implemented based on the survey findings. Next slide. So here, and I know Michael already touched on this a little bit, but to go a little bit more in depth on some of the demographic shifts that we saw between the last study that we did in 2019 and the 2021 study, we saw some big shifts in age, notably that we saw a younger customer base completing the survey in comparison with previous years. We saw more folks in that 35 to 44 age bracket completing the survey than 65 plus. And we also saw an increase in folks who were 18 to 24 years of age and 25 to 34. So that younger demographic, what what we found is that they actually gave lower ratings for a lot of the different company characteristics that I'll touch on in a couple slides, most notably for helping customers conserve electricity and for community service. So that's just important to note when you see any, and again, the decreases were pretty minor here, but when you see those decreases, age was definitely a factor in some of those declines. We also saw some shifts in dwelling type. We saw fewer respondents living in single-family homes and more living in apartments, townhomes, multifamily houses, things like that. And so what we saw was these folks, single-family homeowners, actually gave higher ratings for several company characteristics such as conserving electricity and community service than those living in apartment buildings or condos or townhouses. Next slide.
And those younger demographics will also align with that interest in electric vehicles, both locally as well as nationally. So there are some opportunities, as Catherine mentioned real quickly. There's just been less time for those younger folks to get to know you. So as they get to know you, the likelihood of them aligning with the folks that have known you for a long time in providing you positive ratings is high.
Exactly. We also saw shifts in home ownership patterns. We saw fewer homeowners completing the survey in 2021 compared to 2019, and then more folks reported being renters. So that's important to know as well, especially when you're looking at certain programs, specifically the Connected Home program. A lot of renters aren't going to be able to install a lot of the technology and devices that would qualify you to participate in the Connected Home program, and so they're reporting lower levels of awareness of that program and also of time of use programs, just something that they're not, necessarily able to really explore as much when you're a renter. You just don't have as many capabilities for controlling, usage levels, when it's based on an entire building versus when it's just based on your single home. We also saw shifts in the length of residency that folks have in Shrewsbury. We saw more respondents saying that they lived in Shrewsbury for less than 10 years compared to those who have lived in Shrewsbury for 10 years or more. So again, a big factor, and this is probably corresponds well with the fact that we saw a younger age group completing the survey. We're just seeing people who have lived in Shrewsbury for less time and have less of a overall relationship with the utility as a result, just because they haven't been living there long enough to really know a lot about the utility. And we see that fewer respondents in that group reported that they are incorrectly reported that Selco is not a community-owned utility. So basically, they were just less aware of the ownership model of Selco, likely because they just haven't been living there as long. Next slide. So here's that page I was talking about before, where we look at our different company characteristics, and these are pretty standard across a lot of the utilities in Massachusetts that we do survey work with. What you'll see on the bottom line is our average rating went from 92.4% 2 years ago to 88% this year. Again, that decline is only 4.4 percentage points decline, so it does fall within that margin of error of 5% that we mentioned earlier. So again, these are the kinds of shifts that you can expect when your margin of error is 5%. The results aren't going to be exactly the same every year, and there is a little bit of variation in them. So this is not a significant decline in ratings, but it's something worth noting. The largest declines were in helping customers conserve electricity and in community service. Like I mentioned before, we did see some of those demographics playing into those ratings. Things like age were definitely a factor with that younger audience giving lower ratings there. So that's important to note as well.
And those just let me jump in real quick here, Catherine. Those last three on the right-hand column are really more, or the last two, community service, helping customers conserve electricity. That's a little bit more perception as opposed to the service ratings that are up top. So the actual interactions are very high. And when you get to be over 88%, 89% from an average rating perspective, expect 2 to 3 percentage point shifts up and down each year. It's if you start seeing them downwards in a row that you cause concern. But in this case, 90 went to 92, which went to 88. And this is post-COVID and a lot of changing variables in there. So again, still really great numbers. I wouldn't give too much concern or alarm for.
Definitely. And we are seeing the highest ratings for things that are more service oriented as well. So things like reliable service is consistently having the highest ratings, honesty and integrity, and also your customer interactions and communication are performing well also. Next slide. So then looking into customers' perceptions of the rates that they pay to Selco, we saw over a third, 36.2% said that they feel the rates they pay are lower than surrounding towns, which is a decline from 46.4% in 2019. We saw more folks reporting these rates are about the same, 22%. And then some folks, 12.3%, indicated that they're higher than surrounding towns. But important to note here is that about 3 out of 10 respondents, 29.5%, said don't know, unsure. Simply, don't have enough information about how their rates stack up compared to other towns. And people are always going to say that the rates that they pay are too high, especially if they don't really have a good perception of what other folks are paying as well. Next slide. So now looking into our customer service satisfaction, this is an area where ratings did increase over 2019. We saw 97% of customers who had some sort of an interaction with Selco recently indicated that they were very or somewhat satisfied with the way that that interaction played out. So that's an increase over 94.3% in the last study. This is also, definitely correlated with the fact that about 3/4 of respondents, 74.3%, said that their issues are taken care of the first time that they contact Selco versus having to contact them multiple times to get the job done. So, we always see this being a huge factor in increasing customer satisfaction. When your first contact resolution is high, usually your customer satisfaction is very high as well. When the job's done on the first time, people tend to be more happy with you.
One quick point of reference, typically that 74.3 that you're seeing on first contact resolution, we typically see that in the low to mid 60s. And we do know there's a direct correlation to that first contact resolution to increase satisfaction. Catherine, in the interest of time, I think, Jackie, you can jump ahead to slide 20. So I'll take this one for a second, Catherine, because I had a quick point and I just wanted to make sure that we were being mindful of the timing. This goes back to that earlier conversation about the relationship. So when you see the satisfied customer folk, a slight dip there, loyal customers increased, and then the advocate of Selco decreased a little bit. But when you take that cumulative rating there and you get to 91.4% positive, this is just small little shifts, and you now start to see where that younger audience comes into play a little bit. And so they're moving the bars a little bit. But when you take a look at that overall, composite number of the three of them, still very strong, that 91.4%. And that is a nice indicator when you see the little dips or increases in those company ratings. So we just saw it went from 92 to 88. This is, to me, kind of the level set for that rating. So you're still coming in between those 2 years at the 91.4%. So while the yearly ratings may have gone up a little bit or down a little bit, from an overall perspective, that relationship that they rate you on is a strong one.
Awesome. I think with that, we can move to the next page. All right, so looking into communication preferences here, we asked folks to rate how valuable they find several different communication platforms provided by Selco. We're consistently seeing the highest ratings for Selco's website being valuable, 78.8%. Also seeing a little over 3/5 rating bill inserts and newsletters, as well as direct mail being valuable to them. We did see a decline and folks finding direct mail to be valuable, and then more folks finding things like social media, such as Facebook and Twitter, to be valuable as well. We also didn't ask about television advertisements in 2019. That's why that little asterisk is there, but over a quarter of respondents find those valuable as well. Next slide. So looking at outage restoration time, this question, we essentially removed those people who haven't experienced a power outage in the past year. So this is just looking exclusively at those who have experienced a power outage in the last year. And of those, 92.2% said that the time to restore power was either very or somewhat acceptable. Only 1.3% of respondents indicated that time was not acceptable. So again, very positive findings here. This contributes to those high ratings we saw for reliable service. A lot of folks feel that their power's on majority of the time, and then when it's not, Selco gets to work quickly restoring their power. So very positive findings here. We can move to the next slide. So looking at reductions to carbon emissions. So we asked respondents how aggressive they'd like Selco to be with respect to setting goals to reduce carbon emissions. What you see is an very increased frequency of respondents, 67.9% over 48.3%. So about a 19% increase in respondents who want Selco to be either very or somewhat aggressive when setting these goals for reducing carbon emissions. But nearly 3/4, 73.3%, said that Selco is currently doing enough to curb carbon emissions. And to put this question in perspective as well, when we ask this question to a lot of other utilities, usually the frequency of respondents who want their utility to be aggressive is around 40 to 45%. So this 67.9% is very high compared to a lot of other customer bases. Next question, please. Or next slide, sorry. Going along the same line of thinking, looking at Selco's plans to if Selco should remain on pace with the state of Massachusetts goals for going 100% carbon neutral or accelerate those goals. We do see that over half, 55%, said that Selco should remain on target for 2050. But if you look at those three bars to the right, combined, that's 31.5% of customers, so a little bit less than a third, want Selco to accelerate their goals and reach these goals by 2035. Under the understanding here that Selco's current plans are to reach these goals by 2032. So essentially, Selco is either exceeding these goals for those folks who indicated by 2035, or essentially meeting those goals for those folks who said Selco should reach these goals by 2030. Selco's right in that ballpark of where a lot of customers are expecting them to be at as far as going 100% carbon neutral.
And you're talking a very complex topic for the general public to understand. So for them to say that things feel right, and this slide, regardless of which bar you're looking at, ultimately suggests trust in what Selco's doing and how they're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Next slide. Looking at some different types of generation sources, we asked people how favorable they find each of these generation sources to be. We're seeing the highest favorability ratings for hydropower, 87.7%. We're also seeing more than 4/5 rating solar and wind as being favorable for them. And then lower ratings, less than a half, 48.3% indicated that nuclear is favorable. And this is something where I think a lot of it has to do with the connotation of what nuclear is. And a lot of people just don't have a lot of knowledge about this generation source in comparison with solar and wind. Those are things that will pop up in the news a lot, and people are a little bit more familiar with them. People might not be as familiar with what nuclear is, what the benefits are, costs, reliability, things like that. So that's just kind of an education aspect as well, if that is an area of focus in the future.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on that too, Catherine. This is just the favorability rating. We also, so it was favorable, neutral, or unfavorable. And when you add the neutral on nuclear, it's over 60%, I believe. So whether favorable or neutral, we're still, I agree there's some education required there, but it's right. not a favorable or unfavorable. There was that middle category as well.
So it's not like they're just saying it's completely unfavorable. There is that neutral zone that a lot of people are falling into as well. Next slide. Awesome. All right. So now we ask customers to rank on a scale, 1 to 3, rank the order of importance of these 3 different qualities of their electric service. So reliability, cost of electricity, and the reduction of carbon in the electricity portfolio. We just see over half, 52.2%, ranked reliability as first. That's followed by about a quarter of respondents who ranked the cost of electricity, and then followed by the reduction of carbon, 23.1% who ranked that first. That is very high when compared to some of the other utilities that we asked this question to. When looking specifically at Massachusetts utilities, that number is on average around 15.7% as far as the top priority being reduction of carbon in the electricity portfolio. So the 23.1% is very high as far as those customers who actually are prioritizing that as number 1. Usually what we see is reliability and cost are both somewhere around 50%, and the reduction of carbon is a little bit lower. So next slide, please. So now a couple questions about electric vehicles. We asked respondents how likely it is that their upcoming car purchase or their next car purchase is going to be an electric vehicle. Over one half, 51.5%, said it's either very or somewhat likely that their next car is going to be an electric vehicle. Like I mentioned before, that is very high when compared to a national average. What we're seeing is somewhere around the ballpark of 33 to 34% anticipating their next car to be an electric vehicle. So that's a high number when you're looking just public power utilities across the country. And I would expect that number to increase in future studies, should we keep asking this question. Looking at the benefits of electric vehicles, the top benefit by far is the lack of emissions that they have, as well as the lower cost to fuel and the lower cost to maintain. So seeing cost being a major factor here, as well as just the overall environmental impact of the lack of emissions that the cars produce. Next page. So then we asked when customers anticipate purchasing an electric vehicle in the future. Seeing, about 2/5 of respondents between those first two bars on the left anticipate purchasing an electric vehicle at some point within the next 5 years. So that, purchase coming up quickly. A little over a quarter so that they're never thinking of purchasing an electric vehicle. Again, would be interested in seeing, how age plays a role in this. Would anticipate, kind of that younger group, specifically like under 45, being a little bit more likely to purchase these electric vehicles, and especially accelerating that timeline versus those who are on the older side age-wise. And as far as reasons for not considering purchasing an electric vehicle, big deterrents here are the long charge time. I don't know enough about electric vehicles, so just a need for more research and communication about that, as well as the higher initial cost to purchase is still going to be a drawback for respondents. So, largely due to some uncertainty about electric vehicles overall, how long it will take to charge their car up, and then overall cost savings you'll see in the long run. Granted, you're purchasing the car for a higher value up front, but then, down the road, going to be, ultimately better for the environment and such. Just probably need a little bit of education about what the benefits specifically are of electric vehicles. Next slide. So here's that incentive program that I talked about before. We see over nearly 3/5 of customers, 58.1%, are either very or somewhat likely to participate in an electric vehicle incentive program. And additionally, in this question, we did remove don't know responses in that kind of circle chart on the right, but 61.8%, so over 3/5 said that Selco should incentivize publicly funded electric vehicle charging stations for privately owned businesses. Next slide. So now talking about time of use rates, we saw a little bit less than a quarter of respondents, 24.1%, were very or moderately aware of time of use rates. Like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we did see that home ownership was a big factor here in awareness of time of use rates, just like the Connected Home program. So, those who are renters reported lower levels of awareness compared with those who are homeowners. So that's also important to consider when looking at those numbers. As far as likelihood to enroll in a time of use rate program, after hearing a description of what that program would essentially entail, 49.6% of respondents were either very or somewhat likely to enroll. And that is just a slight increase over 48.5% in the 2019 study. So that number is going up a little bit, but still less than half, ultimately likely to participate in that kind of a program. Next slide. So now the Connected Home program, like we mentioned before, awareness of this, being a new program is high, considering that it's a new program, 21.2%, so a little over 1/5, very or moderately aware. Definitely also an area to educate customers a little bit more about what this program means. But once customers heard a little bit about the program, we saw 44.7%, so a little bit over 2/5 of customers were ultimately interested in enrolling in the Connected Homes program. We do see, though, that about 3 out of 10 respondents, 29%, were not at all interested, and 11.5% said don't know, unsure. So again, an area where if they had a little bit more education about the benefits of this program, the cost savings that they could see ultimately, what devices they need to have in order to qualify for the program, some of those don't know, unsure respondents might be converted to being interested respondents, after time. Next slide. So now looking at the specific devices that respondents have for these connected home programs, we do see that nearly 3/5, 57.4%, don't have any of the devices. And, a lot of these largely being those who are renters or those who don't live in, a single family home. Maybe it's an apartment building, condo, something like that. Of those who do have devices, we see 21.2% have a Wi-Fi thermostat or an electric 13.4% have an electric hot water heater. So there is a segment of customers here, aside from that kind of 57.4% that don't have devices, there is a segment to target who already have these devices in their home. And these should be the folks who are prioritized a little bit more with that communication because they already have what they need really essentially to enroll in the program.
Catherine, I'm going to ask you to jump ahead to considerations. We're running a little long on time, and we're going to cover strategic electrification in there anyhow.
Got it. That's good to me. All right. Yeah. So back to the Connected Homes program. Like I mentioned, only roughly 1/5 of customers were ultimately aware of the Connected Homes program. So even though it is a new program, definitely an area to build a little bit of education, increase overall interest in the program. It didn't seem like a lot of people were ultimately against the program. They just need a little bit of education about what the program would entail and how they can actually get involved themselves. So the consideration here really is to just do a little bit more education about that Connected Homes program. Strategic electrification. This is one area where the knowledge level was pretty low among customers, 15.8%. Again, I think this is one of those areas where once people heard of what examples of strategic electrification are, things like electric vehicles and heat pumps, people are like, oh yeah, I've actually heard of what that is and I do support it. So we did see that, support was a little bit higher in this area. And so just a way to kind of continue to build support is just educating customers about what strategic electrification is and any initiatives that Selco plans to undertake in this area. Next slide. Benefits of nuclear, we did touch on this a little bit overall. Like we mentioned before, it's not so much that folks are against nuclear, just more of those neutral ratings in comparison with the other generation sources that had more of the favorable ratings. Again, another area to kind of educate about benefits of nuclear, what its reliability is like, its expense in relationship to other sources if nuclear is ultimately, a focus down the road. And then lastly, we cap it off the electric vehicle incentive program. This one's already been enacted, but essentially here we were just recommending to initiate this kind of a program, just given that there's a strong interest level among respondents in the program itself, and a lot of customers are intending to purchase an electric vehicle down the road. And that takes us through basically everything. So I think we can open things up to any questions that people have at this time for myself and for Michael.
Well, Michael and Catherine, thank you very much for the concise reporting of the survey. It looks like it was pretty thorough and got a good evaluation of our customer base and some food for thought for where we need to go ahead. I'll ask first, any of the commissioners have any comments or questions? Okay, hearing none. Anybody in the staff? Chris, do you want to comment at all, or have anybody in your staff comment on the survey?
No, I guess just a quick 10-second comment is I've worked with Great Blue myself and in other organizations, and I do appreciate their work, and I have found it to be a very useful tool for strategic planning. So, this is something I think we will continue to leverage in upcoming conversations for adapting our programs. I know we have a couple of additional program details brewing. So my hope is, try and, just to make note of some of these details, and that way when some of these other programs come up, we can refer back to this data set to provide some support.
And just as a final point of reference, I know we threw a lot at you this morning. So as you have questions, as they pop up, please know we're here for you. No additional cost as needed. So as you go through these thoughts and questions and program changes, anything you need, we're here for you. Just give a call and we'll do whatever we can to give you help. So thank you as always for your time and your business. We appreciate it greatly.
Well, thank you. Michael and Catherine again for a very good presentation and being flexible with the technologies, not being able to do it in person. It's a great job. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you on the cable side in the future.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that said, the next item on the agenda is to review financial statements. Is this Mr. Zacco's time to step up to the plate?
Yes, it is. And let's see if I can share this.
Another one's going to disappear.
Oop, let's see. Okay, I apologize. It might be a little small on your screens. But just to start, we're going to start with the electric income statement, and this is for July. The operating revenues compared to budget are 4% over plan, and year-to-date from budget are 3% over plan. Total operating expenses for the monthly compared to plan are 6% above. Year-to-date are below plan 5%. When we look at operating income, we are below plan 7% for the month, and we are above plan 95% for year-to-date. And then when we jump down to net income, for the month, we are 3% below plan, and year-to-date, we're 108% over plan. One thing I want to just point out to everybody is this other income. You can see it's high both in the month budget and year-to-date. When I did a little research into this, it appears to be kind of that COVID effect where now we have more permit fees and job merchandising costs. So this is more of the contractors that are coming in and doing developments and business within town. As you can see down here, this kind of puts us at this time 8% return on plant, and that's within our target range of 1 to 8%. And we'll keep an eye on this as we go through the year. When we look at like year-to-date numbers compared to prior year, everything looks kind of in line, and I'll go over these a little quicker. Just jump down to the net income for year over year for July. We are 45% over previous year, and for year-to-date, we're about 9% over. Once again, these fluctuations are kind of based on 2020 having more of a COVID effect than 2021. The way we budget or have previously budgeted took the previous year's numbers into account and kind of used them for the next year or now current year. And so we do see a little bit of stuff for that. Any questions on Electric's income statement before I move on?
I have a couple questions, just for more education. The two numbers that are different is transmission expenses and distribution expenses, and they kind of flip flop to almost no effect. But what's going on? What's that trend, or what's going on there?
So basically, it could be where stuff is budgeted. So one of the challenges with budgeting is we don't necessarily know where some of the line workers' time is going to be used and where some of these expenses are going to be used during the budgeting process. So once it comes down to how it really happens throughout the year, you may see that bit of flip-flop where we had to put more money into expense or more money into distribution or even generation. For why this year we had to specifically do more, I'd have to look into it and just kind of dive to see what kind of factors we were working on in that place.
Okay, and the other question I had is, at least as to budget, I didn't quite understand what's our approach as to budget versus actual, because the budget is so far below actual. What is actually the intent or benefit?
So part of the goal of the budget is to figure out what next year's cost should be. With the current way we were previously budgeting, it was looking at only 1 year back, and COVID kind of threw that into a wrench where 2019, if you were to look back, you had a lot of work, you had a lot of things going on, and then at 2020, you had a shift in revenue, how it came in because people started working from home, and then you had a shift in our actual ability to work because we were working from home. So a lot of major projects did slow down. With that, it wasn't known what 2021 would bring. So a lot of the expenses were budgeted via what was 2020. This is kind of an anomaly over the industry. I've talked to a couple different people, and right now I'd normally say, hey, we're going to go back 5 years, next year's budget, we're going to look at all that. But this year, because 2022 is kind of predicted to be similar to 2021, we're going to have to take that into consideration. So this year, we're going to look at, what would be our increase just over 2021. We're going to look at what would be a 5-year increase, and we're going to try to get that to the best that we can to say, here's the numbers we think are going to go forward for 2022. But a lot of it is looking at historical averages and kind of saying last year, this is how we used, our labor force, and these are the projects we did. And Chris Roy wants to add more.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
If I may, I forgot about the raise hand feature until this very moment. So I just I didn't mean to cut you off. It was more when you were ready. But a couple comments came to mind. So first on the distribution expenses, and I apologize if this is common knowledge, but one of the things that I have tried to focus on just in general is making sure our activities are appropriately captured. This is right down to the fundamentals of timesheets, right? So when you have a crew go out, they can do a capital job or an expense job. And so the importance of that is different than many organizations where you might have payroll. We set aside depreciation for the specific use of capital investment. And so if we have crews being allocated to expense jobs, you're essentially, use this very loosely, but you're essentially paying for it twice, because you're allocating that depreciation for capital work, which they're not working on if they're doing an expense job. And then you're increasing your expenses, which directly are applicable to the rate. So the more we can shift work to capital, the lower those expenses will go, and the more they'll be absorbed by the depreciation capital reserves that we capture. And so hopefully I don't think we had a ton of room for cost shifting, but if we have less storm work or other maintenance related tasks, and we focus on capital investment, that expense category should go down, but you should see increases in the capital side, which then goes to your second question about the budget. That's how I look at it. As generally speaking, there's a lot of those ongoing tasks, but a big focal point for the budget is how do we allocate our crew time and our warehouse inventory to the different capital jobs, and then monitor that, and also shift things as opportunities arise over time or each year.
And just to add to that, it also is difficult when you look at a 1-month period, because it's tough to know, are we going to have next year in July more distribution or more transmission? It kind of fluctuates. So that's why the numbers hopefully kind of steady out year to date, but it still has that flip-flop effect that you pointed out.
Thank you.
Could I ask one follow-up question relative to transmission? Seems like there's some monthly variability in there. What goes into those charges, and what is attributed to that variability?
So I may have to reach out and ask some help from Ralph, but basically we do have a portion of transmission at Selco. It is a smaller portion of what we have as a business, but from what expenses go in, we do have some payroll that goes in every month. We do have, one of the questions from Frank, I think it was Radigan at the beginning, that expense is all looking at our PTF costs, and Ralph can speak more to that, but those kind of things go toward our transmission budgets. Ralph, do you want to go a little deeper into?
I without knowing exactly what was charged to the transmission expense account off the top of my head, I'd have to take a look at that. And there is, of course, the MWIC budget on their website that shows what our transmission expenses are. And that's getting the power to Shrewsbury. So those are the transmission expenses for using the national grid and actually outside of New England transmission lines. So those costs are allocated for those companies that own the transmission lines that the energy travels through to get to the Shrewsbury substations. And without looking at the details, I'm not comfortable answering exactly what makes up the transmission expense for this particular month that we're looking at.
Is it typically highly variable month to month?
It could be based on, of course, the amount of, if you're looking from, it shouldn't be that much variable month to month from year to the same month last year. So I'd have to take a look at why this might vary that much between the same month this year versus the same month last year. I don't know why that would be until I look more detailed into the numbers.
Thanks.
If I may, I could add to that as well. So I think the primary cost driver for the transmission would be that monthly peak. So transmission costs being set by the month-to-month peak load, and that where it lends itself to the variability of the load applied to that transmission price set by the RNS and LNS rates. And then I guess that further emphasizes some of that future demand response strategy and battery strategy with mitigating that peak. So if we're more effective at dispatching batteries and perhaps other assets, then we could have a greater influence. But I think yes, there are those other bills that were cited, but I would classify it, in my own opinion, as those monthly RNS and LNS charges applied to our variability of load.
Okay. In the way that, sorry, just one other quick question. The way in the purchased power line item, is that there's no transmission expense embedded in that line? Is that all covered and broken out in the transmission expenses?
Yeah,
I would have to double check that for you. Some of this data is multiple layers to get through in the current structure we have to get to the source data to really understand some of that. So let me look into that one and get back to you.
So another great question. So yesterday we had a meeting for our next October, potential October agenda is that generation and transmission adjustment. And so in that, we look at the generation and transmission adjustment is based on a past actual and forward-looking reconciliation of expenses. And so in that discussion, we go over in more detail about the actual FERC accounts that go into those different categories. So you would see I guess the differentiation between generation expenses, what we categorized as purchase power versus transmission. So, and so within those categories, you'd see the actual breakdown of how the costs are allocated.
So, Chris, are you saying that next month we'll just further discuss this?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could have one last quick question.
Sure.
Sorry. On the generation side, is that comprised of operating peaker, solar plant? Like what is embedded in that?
Correct. That would be from our side, the peaking plant, the solar, and those type of costs.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on, we're going to take a quick look at the balance sheet for electric. And as you can see, the total current assets increased almost 2 million. Jumping down and looking, our non-total current assets increased about 1 million year over year. As we jump down a little further, you can see we have a total asset increase of about 3 million. Our liabilities year over year have decreased about 2 million. And then our earned surplus is increased about 5 million year over year, giving us a total liabilities and earned surplus of around 3 million. From everything I can see so far, and I've been diving into in the last 5 months, it looks like we do have a very healthy financials for electric. Any questions on the balance sheet?
What happens to the surplus at the end of a fiscal year?
So it ends up going into retained earnings.
And does that carry over year to year?
Yes. Yes. So basically all the profits at the end of the year that aren't used, that are, we have to be capped at 8% on the electric side, would end up going into retained earnings for future use.
And is that usually done for capital expenditures or sort of a reserve account?
Can be both. It can be used in capital, it can be used in reserve, it can be used if all of a sudden one year, let's say everything is totally off like a COVID year, but we kind of, if you will, lucked out. People were working from home, and there wasn't a crazy, throw of our revenue. But let's say something disastrous like that happened and our revenue dropped a ton, we could use that to help sustain the business.
Yeah, if I can comment on that a little bit, part of all that retained earnings really helped the town maintain its AAA or obtain a AAA bond rating, because Selco's cash in hand basically was infused into the discussion to show that we had over 6 months of the ability to, if catastrophic effects or whatever, that we could pay for all the electricity to be supplied to the town out of the monies that we have, in these funds. And additionally, just the fact that we had the cash helped the town get obtain the AAA bond rating. So it's actually very advantageous to not only Selco but the town in general that as we make that money, that we set it aside.
Great.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll jump over to cable. So we'll start with the cable income statement. And once again, this is for July. Looking at operating revenues, they're about 7% over plan. And then year to date, we're about 2% over plan. The total operating expense is 4% below plan for the month. And year to date, we're also 4% below plan. Total operating income is 61% above plan for the month and 27% above plan for year to date. Taking a look down at net income, we are 54% above plan for the month, and year to date, we're 22% above plan. Jumping down to the year to date numbers, just going over the net income, we're about 36% above plan year over year, and year to date, we are about 3% below. Any questions on the cable income statement? Okay, if there's no questions, we will jump onto the cable balance sheet. So taking a look at current assets, we see a massive jump of 17 million. To address that, this is twofold. It is partly the bond we took out for the fiber project, and then it is increasing depreciation for the fiber project. Now, one thing you may have noticed when we looked at the cable balance sheet, the depreciation fund was listed under non-current assets. Here, the depreciation fund is included in other funds, which is included in the current assets. I did a little research as to why that is. That is because Massachusetts requires on the electrical side that we have a depreciation fund. It is not required from the cable side, but it is advantageous. So we do want one, and because it is still considered optional, the funds live in the current assets because they could be used in other terms. It's more of an earmark that Selco has. I had to look into that myself because I was kind of confused at first, so I just wanted to explain that. Jumping down to non-current assets, we have an increase year over year of about 2 million, giving our total asset increase about 19 million. Looking at our liabilities, we see an increase of about 14 million, and once again, that is attributed to the bond. When we take a look at earned surplus, we have an increase of 5 million, and then our total liabilities and earned surplus is at 19 million. And that number, once again, is jumped up because of the bond for fiber. Any questions on the cable balance sheet? Okay, quickly, I just wanted to give some insight. As you know, I'm a little newer. We're going through a lot of internal changes. So a lot of the stuff that, we talked about earlier, you're going to start seeing, but a couple of our goals in finance is we're going to start simplifying our chart of accounts. We're going to start lining it up with FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulation Code. We're going to make sure we're all compliant in there, remove outdated things and make those changes. We're also in the process of pretty much streamlining most of our processes and looking at changes. We're removing things that we don't consider value add today. And that goes to the question earlier, why did we have, the light receivables and the cable receivables? We're going to start to streamline away from a lot of that stuff. We're looking at putting the majority of these processes that we can in the system. We're going to try to increase the detail entry of what goes into our system and add different checks at the point of entry going in. The big goals for this is we want to start getting more efficient. We really want to start utilizing our systems. We want to reduce any internal confusion on things by calling them exactly what we are and having everybody use those same type of terms. And the three biggest points that we're going to look at this year for change in 2022 would be accounts payable, payroll, and inventory. And basically, this is going to be a 2 to 3 year process of changing how we previously did things so that we have more transparency and visibility into what these numbers are. But that's kind of my little spiel for today. Any questions about anything?
I have a question.
Yes.
So when you do all these changes and you're going through, you're simplifying all the chart of accounts, which is all great things. How is that going to impact your when we look at comparisons moving forward? Like, you know what I mean? Like, we have questions now,
Yes.
like, why are these off? So like this, like, we're looking at a few years where things are going to look really skewed because things are going to be in different categories.
It shouldn't, and that's one factor I've been taking in, and it's how I'm going to map accounts from one account to another. A lot of it right now today is we use these really robust accounts, and the previous process was very Excel heavy, so you couldn't add a new account, you couldn't remove an account. So we have accounts that are named things where I'm diving into them and I'm going, what could be in this account? And it's just a placeholder because that account already existed. So we're going to do a lot of those cleanups, and the current structure of accounts still has those FERC numbers in it. We're just going to shorten everything to FERC. So my goal at the end is still to have that comparison of this fed into this account, and we can still see those things year over year so we don't lose, what were we doing last year this time?
Okay, great. So just you just sparked a question. You said you're using a lot of it's Excel heavy. So are you not able to produce financial statements or the financial reports that you need from the accounting software that you're using?
Yes and no. So my predecessor's process was to enter information into the system in a certain format. He then took that format and he had a ton of Excel spreadsheets populating a ton of different things, journal entries, different reports, budgets, all this stuff. And when I say there was a lot of linked spreadsheets, I stopped counting at one point at 600. No hyperbole there. The goal is to, that process worked for him, but that is very intuitive to his mindset. The goal going forward is to not be beholden to whoever is in this position. We want everything in the system and to be able to run. Munis does have some, it's not a utility software, so there are some issues with certain things like, work order processing in areas like that. They don't work like a utility software would, but I don't at this point see a reason why we can't start slowly trying to get the system set up so financials can come out of it.
All right, thank you.
Any other commissioners have any questions for Mr. Zacco?
I just want to say that I continue to be very impressed by the presentation, orally and written. It's a vast improvement in my view and much more understandable to me. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd concur. If there are no other comments from any of the commissioners, I think we've completed item 8, which was review financial statements. There's no vote required. I will move on to item 9, which is review and consider approval of a sports fee credit. And Mr. Roy, I think Jackie Pratt's going to present that. So Jackie, the floor is yours.
So back in March, we had a similar conversation for a sports fee credit. Due to the pandemic, some of our programming partners were unable to meet their minimum programming requirement for live sports. In March, when we received our first credit, it was the Commission's decision to pass that on to customers. The proposal here is to do the same thing. Since we've distributed the original credit back in April, it went on April bills. We've had 3 more credits come through, and as detailed here, just pull up the numbers so I get them right. It's all out of order because I was sorting stuff. Give me one moment. Sports fee. There we go. Sorry, guys. So what we wanted to do, the total amount that we received since the disbursement in April is $113,000. $113,006.30 if we want to be precise. And when we look at the number of subscribers on the expanded basic package, that includes expanded basic, commercial expanded basic, TiVo, commercial TiVo, and expanded senior. What we did was, as we did back in March when we had this conversation, we took the total amount, divided it by the number of customers on those affected packages, and the recommended credit for expanded basic, commercial expanded, TiVo, and commercial TiVo is $18.60 per customer, and then the expanded basic senior is $16.18, as they do receive a discount and paid into it a different amount. So that's the recommendation. We'd like to follow suit as we did this spring.
Okay, with that said, do we have a motion to extend the or to provide basically a rebate to the customers for one time in October for the sports fees? Do we have a motion to approve the rates as set forth by Ms. Pratt?
Yes, I move that we approve these rates as stated.
Okay, do we have a second?
A second.
Okay, roll call vote to approve the recommendation to provide sports fee credits to all the affected customers for in October. Mr. Trippy?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Lemieux?
Yes.
Mr. Ruffolo?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Beaton?
Yes.
And Bob Holland, yes. So the sports fee rebate is approved, which leads us to our final agenda item, which is the general manager's highlights. So, Mr. Roy, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. I will be as brief as possible, and then please ask any questions that I may have overlooked. The one I wanted to start with and spend a little bit of time on is that first bullet point in the legislative bits of the Federal Clean Energy Performance Program. That has been the hot topic over the last maybe 2 weeks or so. I would say the main point I'd like to convey with that is we're in good shape with respect to this proposed legislation. In summary, it's on the federal level looking to assign a 4% year-over-year emissions reduction target. And so if you meet that target, you would get grant money. And if you fail to achieve that target, then you pay a penalty. The power supply policy we adopted at the prior meeting had established a 5% year-over-year increase. So we had already been prepared for that. And so my main point of awareness is if this becomes a goal for everyone on the federal level, that will certainly impact the rec markets and renewable energy opportunities out there. So the biggest concern expressed is that's great. We can mandate this for everybody, but when is all this generation going to come online? And so that's fine. That's certainly a challenge we can address and overcome over time. But I say with the policies we have in place, we're positioned to meet those goals. And now, if this passes, we'd be eligible for grant money to help fund whatever initiatives help us achieve those goals. So that's kind of that legislation in a nutshell. And so then, in typical fashion, I try and include some other interesting data points that might be worth a read and provide the sources there, so you can see, well, where I get that information, but also if you dig into any of these articles, it leads down similar type of topics to provide further education. But I do like to just always highlight the advantages of our business model. I mean, EverSource continues to demonstrate the issues that the private sector is facing with their adaptations to modern utility business. But then there's some of the other ones that just show support for the direction we're headed and theme with the customer survey results. LADWP in Los Angeles, they're moving to these types of objectives. We look at LADWP, SMUD, Sacramento, Austin Energy in Texas, Seattle City Light. These are a lot of the larger public power entities across the country, and so we use them as a reference point in many ways as I engage with APPA and take a look at their programs and look for folks that have implemented research projects. As you may recall, I'm fortunate enough to serve as the Region 8 representative for the APPA DEED Board of Directors, which is our research and development arm for APPA. So we see a lot of these innovations coming through the pipeline. Same with Burlington Electric Department, net zero revenue bond, just some of these things that are certainly of interest. A couple more just that pertain to initiatives we have going on, the electric panels. So something that I just like to highlight as we develop the programs and strategic electrification, and I guess setting the stage for a budget presentation in a couple of months. Panels become a deterrent in some cases to a lot of the electrification initiatives we're trying to push. So as we look for new and innovative ways to overcome these obstacles, that's something to keep in mind. And we're certainly looking at that as we develop our programs. The high-tech meters could hike electric bills. I had to throw that one in there because we have an AMI project going on, and we didn't have the same issue. So somehow there's another utility business model out there that seems to think it's going to destroy everything and they need to be paid $1 bazillion. We'll have AMI meters deployed over the next couple of years. And if you flip to the engineering and operations update, you'll see our progress on our path for that. And then again, that last bullet point, we are seeing an uptick in discussions surrounding batteries. So one of the things that I think is a natural evolution of the industry is we had outside folks in my past in a community like Shrewsbury with a lot of land. You could have folks come in and contact us about solar installations, and now the next one is batteries. So as an economic development opportunity and a revenue source, we've had folks contact us proactively about siting battery in town. So we've engaged in those types of evaluations. One of the big advantages we have is that last bullet point of the legislative bits is the fact that we offer very reasonable turnaround times for interconnect evaluations. And so, in working with public power, we're able to make short order of these development opportunities and be a true partner in seeing these projects through. And then just a couple of real quick highlights through the actual operating day-to-day operations. You can see the EV chargers at the high school. with the grants. That's all. I think really exciting progress. The EV rebate program we already discussed, and then the Main Street partnerships, all somewhat dovetailing with some of those legislative bits in the prior section. We have a lot of recruitments going on. It's been an interesting time between retirements and filling new positions to cover gaps that we've identified and make sure we're keeping pace with customer expectations. So that's kind of a new section there to see the comings and goings of what's going on. And just stay updated on that.
Hey, Chris, just a real quick on the human resources. I don't know, Ed Crowley, I guess.
Yes.
Just to be noted that maybe you want to address that a little bit.
Yes. Ed Crowley, again, another 32-year employee, announced his retirement effective next week. So we congratulate him on that for sure. Ed is a veteran of our help desk. So we'll look at how we continue to keep that knowledge base going. Same thing. We're not truly the same, but then we had congratulations to Ed Lempitsky to his transition to the head end from field operations, another longtime employee, very knowledgeable. That was a great transition for him to support another area of the business. So there's some work to do to shift the backfill there. And again, we try and facilitate and value career development. And so these progressions are going to emphasize retention of the valuable knowledge base that we have, and then hopefully we'll be posting for new talent at the more entry level roles, and we can grow that through the pipeline. And then I guess in the interest of time, I would just kind of really briefly mention I pause there for sure.
Matt, go ahead.
If I may, thank you. Just a couple of questions. One on the human resources side, and then another on the AMI side. Are you seeing challenges hiring, finding good candidates? Job market's out of control right now in a lot of industries. Are you having any challenges with that?
We are. I mean, I certainly I don't want to speak for Tracy as our HR guru, but we have some recruitments going on, and I can turn it over to you.
Not very challenging. We had a lot of unqualified applicants, so it's just screening through to try to figure out who to actually bring in for an interview. That's probably the biggest challenge. A lot of people not understanding that this is kind of a niche job. They think that just because they have experience doing procurement for a major corporation, that's going to translate to a utility, but it's actually there are like certain rules and laws that we need to follow that they're completely unaware of. So it's just more making sure that people are aware that this isn't going to be like a seamless transition. They're going to have to do a lot of learning.
Are we finding the same thing on I just see the electrical engineer on the list as well. Is that going well?
Yeah. That's also a challenge just because it is such a specific job. We do have a few candidates that we are considering though.
Great. And then just one quick question back to, you mentioned AMI really quickly, and you pointed to a place to refer to learn more. Could you specify where there might be more information on that?
Oh, sure. Well, we have, I guess we have maybe I misspoke. So the AMI section I was referring to was our project update. We can provide anything you'd like to know about where we are at and our intent with our, the vendor selection and things like that. The AMI that I was also included in there was let's look back here. What was that source on that one? It was from the Gloucester Daily Times. But again, that was in reference to National Grid and Eversource looking to implement AMI programs. And so that was some of their DPU hearings.
with Okay.
respect to rate increases they'd like to implement for their AMI infrastructure, whereas by contrast, we, back to our budget presentation, we're leveraging our depreciation funds and the money that we have to invest in capital progress that doesn't result in major rate hikes for a routine, what I consider a routine project.
And
Okay.
Matt, for people watching at home, for information about how the AMI project is going to impact them, we do have selcoupgrade.com.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
But from our standpoint, just I guess since that is another big project aside from fiber, and I see him running short on time, but AMI, that has been impacted by supply chain shortages that we see with vehicles and things like that. But we are fortunate we have a shipment of meters in. I think our engineering team can correct me if I misspeak, but we have about 300 meters to prepare ourselves for the first implementation of, I guess I'd call it a pilot area, but it's really a first deployment area to get our gateways established, get meters installed, make sure they communicate with our billing system before we go with a widespread 16,000 meter deployment.
Okay.
So we have that first.
It'd be interesting to have a conversation down the road, certainly not for today, but that intersection of in the presentation that we saw, the customer survey, there was a section on time varying rates.
Yes.
Talking about that in conjunction with AMI and even the Connect Home program, it's all sort of getting to the same thing, right? The load regulation. It'd be a interesting conversation, I think, for the board to have to talk about maybe what the future of that looks like for the town.
Oh, that's absolutely. That's absolutely a great agenda topic for the future, and a shameless plug for the budget conversation in a couple of meetings. We talk about the Munis system handling financial reports. We talk about the smart metering system. We talk about demand response and rate setting and time of use. All of that should lead to a budgetary line item request for a new enterprise management system that integrates all of that together. We have the caveat of the cable system, so we're working through some of the capabilities to interface with cable, but certainly from an electric standpoint, also the data point on that is it's a really good user interface for those that want to do everything online. So it's a fully inclusive enterprise system that touches all of these aspects of the business.
Yeah, following up on what just Matt said, also I found it intriguing that the use of electric vehicles actually seems to be will be on the rise, and what we should do, if anything, to in a way make sure we're prepared for that or be prepared for that, and kind of what the effect on that would be on us, and what additional services potentially we could provide related to that. That
is a really good point. It's something that jumped out at me in that survey was 51% of the people buying a new car was going to be an EV, and what that's going to do, that should wake us up, right? That's a lot of load, probably all at the same time, right? Yeah. So.
Well, and that gets you again, how are you going to spread it so that you don't have the peaks and valleys during the day, because you're just not going to have the source to provide that. Additionally, the town's been pretty proactive with Ralph's team going up and upgrading our transmission lines within the town to a much higher voltage and a much less line loss and whatnot to be able to support this kind of future development. I'm not trying to steal from Ralph, but I think that kind of goes with that, I think. Mr. Zacco, I see you have your hand raised.
Quickly, I just wanted to answer Matt's question from earlier. Our transmission expense only includes transmission expense. Purchase power is all generation. So there is no transmission in the purchase power. And the only thing missing from that is Selco's personal generation.
Great. Thank you. Which is captured. Where is Selco's own? Is it captured in that generation? The expense of the generation is captured in the generation line item.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Back to you, Mr. Roy.
I see Ralph raised his hand. I didn't know if we were. Actually, I had something on the HR end, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
I just want to recognize a longtime employee, Francis Piker, who passed away recently. He was a 30-year employee, retired in 2003. I actually started with Fran when I started here in 74. I worked with Fran for several years. And then he was my predecessor. When he retired, I took his position as the system engineer. I just want to recognize Fran as a very devoted public servant. I think he did a good job for Selco. At the time, it was Shrewsbury Municipal Light Plant before cable. So I just wanted to recognize his service to Selco.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Haggerty. Appreciate it. Okay, Mr. Roy, anything else?
I'll just skip ahead to speak to our other major project on the fiber side. So fiber phase 1 is wrapping up. I would say, well, the core of the phase 1 is wrapping up over the next couple weeks. We'll still have, as anyone would, I guess, expect, we'll have the cleanup component that I expect due to the size. I mean, this is small things and even labeling, just return work that will continue through probably the end of November or so. And so at the same time, we are wrapping up our design for phase 2, which is that, if my crude summary, that middle swath of town. So phase 2, as we finalize the design, we expect to start issuing those bids also in November. So we'll have that. And so as phase 1 and all of that cleanup work wraps up towards the end of November, we should start ramping up the beginning stages of phase 2 at, I'd say, really realistically speaking, probably just after Christmas to the first of the year. And we're working on that to prioritize overhead sections. Obviously, during the winter, it's a lot easier to work on that. So that we'll see that start to ramp up first of the year as the bids come in.
How are we seeing with the first phase, which was the northern portion of the town, and we're wrapping that up? How about the acceptability of the customers? Are people signing up for fiber in droves, or is it just a trickle? Or
yeah,
what's the status on that?
Sure, Jackie, I don't know if you want to speak to that since you're making all the calls.
Sure. So the customer service staff has been reaching out to customers, particularly in Node 3 and Node 27 right now. The intent is to migrate everybody from the old DOCSIS internet to fiber, rather than letting folks do it sort of voluntarily over time. We think that there's real value in getting this fiber plant, up and running for across the board, rather than just letting folks migrate on their own. We've made some phone calls, and we probably have, I think Robin told me yesterday, at like a 30% response rate so far, where we've been able to book appointments with them. The communication, like I said, is phone calls directly to them. We've also sent out postcards. The intent with these first few nodes is to be able to turn off the DOCSIS internet to those customers for the beginning of December. As we start to go through the process and turn up other nodes, we will follow the same kind of communication strategy with different end dates. So it'll be sort of a rolling project, but the intent is to get everybody over to the fiber plant rather than allowing them to remain on the DOCSIS. We think that it's just a much better, more reliable system.
Jackie, what does the process entail for the customer?
Great question, Matt. So we have a site survey that's required. Our staff will come out and take a look at the house to make sure that we know what work needs to be done, both outside and inside the house, to bring the new drop and install the new ONT equipment. And then once the site survey is complete, sometimes we're able to do the install right there. More likely than not, we'll actually call you back and schedule a second appointment for us to come out and actually do the work.
Is there work in interior?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Okay. The ONT gets installed inside the house, and then typically the customer will be able to use their same Wi-Fi router that they have, if it's capable of handling the faster speeds. If not, they're always welcome to sign up for Selco's Wi-Fi product, which is designed to handle the fast, super fast internet that we provide over fiber.
in a new line, it would be a new line from the pole and then the new equipment inside.
Yep, it's a second fiber drop to the house rather than the coax.
Yep.
If you have TV for now, the coax will remain in place, but we're looking to transition that as well at some point.
What's the added cost to a customer once? Is there a cost for install or fee for install, and then what's the added charge, if any, for the customer?
Sure. So there's no fee for install because we're requiring the migration to the new platform. The cost for service increases by $10 per month. You're getting faster speeds both up and down. And the key with fiber is you're getting symmetrical upload speeds, which is something we haven't been able to touch on the DOCSIS side. To ease the transition, we're giving customers basically $10 off for the first 3 months to try and help them acclimate to the new pricing and enjoy those faster speeds at no additional cost for the first few months.
And I may be confused, but if on the Wi-Fi, you have the different grades, the silver and the gold, how does that go away, and it's $10 more than one of those grades, or is that a different charge?
Yeah, so if you're on silver now, right, you're going to go to silver plus, and that's the fiber package, and that's what the $10 more is. If you're on gold, you're going to go to gold plus. If you're on platinum, you're going to go to platinum plus. Customers are welcome to move anywhere within those grades. If you're on gold now and you feel like you want to downgrade to silver plus when you go to fiber, it's an option. But typically folks like the speeds that they have for the download, and by transitioning to fiber, they're getting even faster download speeds and now also symmetrical upload speeds. So, I mean, for that $10 more a month, they're getting bang for the buck, so to speak.
Got it.
One other point that comes to mind related to that, just to didn't make the highlights, but something we've engaged in over the last week is looking for a suitable consultant to help do a cable cost of service study to help inform some of those questions. As I'm sure everyone's familiar with, we have the electric cost of service study. I think that was 2 years ago. Time is escaping me, but I think that was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And so now we're looking to do the same on the cable side, where we, as we have the service offerings change and Wi-Fi packages and new broadcast rates come in. I think it's just time to get our bearings to make sure our rates are where we want them to be.
Yeah, and I do have, a somewhat related, something that wasn't also included in the highlights. So years ago, folks, you may remember that we discontinued the old standard internet package, and we allowed customers to remain on that. We haven't upgraded those speeds in quite a long time, and it's really a defunct package. We have been seeing migration off of that package for years since we discontinued it, but we finally reached a point where that package needs to be sunset, right? It's going to go away. So customers who are still remaining on that standard internet package have recently received notification that as of October 1st, they're going to be moved to silver. If they needed new modems to support that, they were notified so that they have the correct equipment to support the speeds that they're going to be receiving. But this is part of that transition, because then those folks will also at some point be moved to fiber. So just if you get any questions on that, that is part of this overall transition that we're seeing.
Okay. What else? Anything else, Mr. Roy?
No, sir. I think that covers it.
Okay. Any other commissioners have any other questions or comments, or are we ready to adjourn? Hearing no questions or comments, I will move to have the meeting closed. We'll take a roll call vote. But before we do that, I just want to remind everybody that the next meeting is scheduled for the approved schedule now of Tuesday morning, the 19th of October at 7:30 a.m. And with that, I'll take a roll call to adjourn. Mr. Trippy?
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Lemieux?
Yes.
Mr. Rivolo?
Yes.
Mr. Beaton?
Yes.
Okay, and Bob Holland, and the meeting adjourns at 9:13 a.m. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.